I grew up in a very formal household. I never saw my dad without a tie. My mother, I remember with an apron most of the time. I don't remember a lot of the details, but there were never any raised voices. It was warm, but very formal kind of atmosphere to grow up in. And I made a decision at some point along the way that while it was okay, and I grew up, I turned out okay, I think, that I wasn't going to pass that along to the people that I live with. I don't have any kids, but I am married, and I would say that we're not particularly formal around the house. My wife has seen me without a shirt and tie on from time to time. And I'm telling you all this because I have a very interesting guest, Catherine Chan. She's a Chinese-Canadian mom and blogger for the Huffington Post. And I mentioned that you're a Chinese-Canadian mom because it plays into the story that we want to talk to you about. So, Catherine Chan, welcome to the Nightside.
Oh, it's very nice to be on the show.
Now, when you became a mom, you did, according to your blog, a lot of self-reflection. And
Absolutely.
You wanted to change things up a little bit from the way you were raised. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So when I became a mom, I realized that growing up in Canadian, my parents were Chinese, and I grew up in Canada, so I realized that there was a lot of the Eastern and Western influences that I had that didn't really become apparent until I became a mom, because now I've got a daughter. What do I want to preserve in this family to her? What do I treasure? What do I value? And so I started writing and kind of writing all these things down, having just sleepless nights, writing everything down, and I decided to come up with a blog. I first Googled if there were any other kind of Chinese Canadian or Chinese moms who were kind of talking about the same issues that I was feeling, and I couldn't find anything. So I said to myself, you know what, I'm going to start it. I'm going to try and create a community of folks to look for someone like myself to empower them with personal stories of courage and vulnerability to really get things going so that they talk about things despite growing up in a culture that hides them.
And tell me what the reaction was. We'll get to some of the specifics in a second, but what was the reaction when you started to build this community?
It was, honestly, I would say not 80%. It has been quite positive. Mm-hmm. I've joined several Facebook Asian parenting groups. There's Reddit. There's tons of little communities that I've discovered, and just with my own personal friendships that I've held with other Asian moms. Generally, it's been quite positive because it's been validating to know that the experiences I've had growing up are very similar to everyone else. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Will you raise your kids the same way that you were raised? That's the question that we're asking here. And you can call us at 416-872-1010 or text us at 71010, and we'll get to your stories. Right now, I'm talking with Catherine Chan, Chinese-Canadian mom and blogger. So tell me about some of the things that you decided to change up a little bit. And one of them was you will not discourage crying.
Yeah, exactly. So when I was growing up, crying was seen as this very negative, shameful act that you would do in your private time. So whenever I felt like I wanted to cry, I would run to my room, close my door, and do it very privately. And really, it's because my parents never cried in front of us. Mm-hmm. And I think it was, to me, I believed it was a sign of weakness. It was shameful. And so, I mean, I shared in my article in the Huffington Post about my mom who had lost her dad, my gong, my grandpa, and the way she mourned was very privately. I would hear her crying in the bathroom at night, and then in the morning she would show up with a very brave face, even though it looked like she had been crying all night. And so taking that experience and knowing the healthy response that we have with crying, that cathartic feeling that I've had with crying, as a parent, I'm not going to be discouraging that. For my daughter, when she's crying, I don't try and hush her up or tell her to stop crying or make it as though it's a negative thing. I really try and understand what's going on with her. I know she's only 2, but, emotions are emotions. Mm-hmm. And, even if she couldn't tie her shoe properly and she's crying, she's frustrated, she can't communicate to me exactly what her frustration is, I feel I have this responsibility to change that cycle and really put crying as a positive reaction rather than, like covering it up of some sort and creating a private response.
I'm speaking with Catherine Chan. You can read her entire blog on the Huffington Post. Comparing children, something else that you don't think you're carrying forward.
Oh, yes. So I've actually written quite a couple of articles on this on the Huffington Post. It's also on my own blog, some on sleeve, heart, like some is in heart in Chinese, on sleeve.com. And really, it's this, I've talked to so many folks about this, so many Asian people, that during family dinners and dinners with family relatives, a lot of the times the older generation likes to compare their kids. So they would sit around the table and talk about their kids as though they're objects. And of course, I'm sharing my own experience about this, but they would talk about from grades to physical appearance to what sports or extracurricular activities they're in, and as though they're these objects that, it's one's better than the other, and therefore, someone is smarter in this area, and therefore they're better than this other kid who's not doing as well. And so I really saw that as an opportunity for myself as a parent to really not because I've read so many things about to foster self-confidence, self-motivation, self-awareness, that if we compare kids, all they're seeing is how they compare to other kids and not really creating the self-confidence that they have in themselves and being able to compete with themselves rather than competing with others. So that's and it can be, it can be done in so many different ways. Yeah.
We just have about a minute left. Hitting as a form of discipline. That's something that is just a no-no in your household now.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I have a background in mental health, and I completely understand the implications and the consequences of physical violence towards your children. This is actually a very shared experience of a lot of Asian people. Hitting as this corporal punishment, it's such an unfortunate, common parenting practice. There's jokes been made out about it, memes, YouTube videos. It's this kind of like bittersweet joke that we share amongst the community. And that's definitely one thing that I do not want to preserve as a parent.
We have to leave it there, but you say something really interesting in this, and I love this, that your mom's a life learner. After reading blogs and speaking with you, I suppose, she's changed her mind about certain things.
Absolutely. Yes, she has. She's always open-minded. She's the most non-judgmental person. Like, she grew up in a very traditional household, but she came to Canada. She's my mentor, my hero. Came to Canada in the mid-'70s to Winnipeg, of all places, by herself to be a hairdresser. And she has a knowledge and her abilities as a mom, but over time, and now as a grandma of three grandchildren, she is just completely changed in her perspective of the way we parent. So she's my hero.
Catherine, thanks so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.